Oh wait, I forgot to put music on. Again! I forgot to put music on. Good morning, everybody! Good morning! Good morning, good morning, good morning! There we go. Aha! Good morning! Okay, I know I said good morning like a million times, but I needed to make sure all the sound settings are right. Because I'm dumb and I forgot to set them up already. Alright, hi everybody! Welcome back! Welcome back, welcome back! Freya, good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here and being awesome as always. Today we're going to be continuing and possibly concluding the rest of the Picture of Dorian Gray. It's relatively chill morning. I woke up late. Good night, good evening, good night, Paperface. I loved your little fan art that you did. It made me cry. I saw it right after stream and I just burst into tears. It made me so happy. I loved it so much. Thank you so much for that adorable little fan art. I am probably going to end up drawing something based on that. So maybe later and probably post it later or tomorrow. It was so cute. I loved it so much. Thank you. Like I saw it after after I ended the stream and I just like burst into tears. I was so happy. It was so sweet. You're such a sweetheart. Thank you so much. But yeah, I'm a little gravelly right now. I just woke up. This is my morning voice. So good morning. You are Chatburb. You're like a fluffy Chatburb. I love it. I love it. You are fluffy Chatburb confirmed. So now I gotta do a drawing based on that because it was so cute and inspired me, but I've been so busy. I was so busy yesterday that I didn't get the chance to sit down and take the time to draw. Oh, choked on my tea. Oh, this is a great morning already. Jesus Christ. Live on stream, Kay dying because she choked on her tea. Ugh. Today is a morning. I haven't even eaten breakfast yet. I'm not hungry. I'll probably eat right after stream. I have a cup of tea that I just choked on. I am dying. Well, good morning, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time it is. Happy time zone. Good time zones. Oh, this is a scuffed start already. Anywho, no dying a lot. I can't promise anything, Freya. I can't promise anything. You know this. Well, dying aside, or the attempt to die aside, let's get back into the Picture of Dorian Gray. We're almost done. It has gone from 0 to 100 fairly quickly. So now we're going to continue reading and of course finish it because we're right at the end. We're near the end. We have a good small portion left. We're on chapter 25 and I believe the last chapter is chapter 9, not 29. So we have the last chapter is chapter 20. So we have 5 more chapters to read and we should be able to get through them in this time. So let's get into it. I hope you enjoy. Last time we left off, Dorian went nuts. He tried to be vulnerable. He found he couldn't do it and ended up killing one of his oldest friends, the artist who created his portrait, Basil Howard. And then got one of his former friends to dispose of the body. And it went from 0 to 100 very quickly in this story. So let us continue. With chapter 25. I'm not taking another sip of my tea again in case I choke. Blah. Chapter 25. Oh, also, is the music alright? It's not too loud, not too low. I have a little bit of chill, lo-fi background music. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too loud, too low. It's good. Freya, is it good? The music's good. The music, background music, good. I got stuck on a loop. I'm sorry, I got stuck on a loop. My brain. This is what happens. This is the K that wakes up immediately and has to do stuff. This is the K that if you say, hey, you gotta wake up in the morning and get things done. This is the K that you're getting. One who is like half broken before they even get to start. Ah. You guys are seeing a whole new side of me today. ah. Okay. Before I even get to start, I had a hard time waking up. Have you guys ever had this where you just have a really hard time waking up in the morning and your brain just doesn't want to work? That's me today. I woke up, I was like, oh my god, it's so late. I have to prepare for the stream. And, my brain just broke entirely. I just had a whole broken brain moment. I see, hello! Good morning. Good morning. We're getting into it. I'm broken this morning. I'm still booting up in a way. But yeah, okay, let's just get into it. I'll be alright. Let's just get into it. Chapter 25. That evening at 8:30, exquisitely dressed and wearing a large buttonhole of Parma violets, Dorian Gray was ushered into Lady Narborough's house, Narborough's dressing room, drawing room by bowing servants. His forehead was throbbing with maddened nerves, and he felt wildly excited. But his manner as he bent over his hostess' hands was as easy and as graceful as ever. Perhaps one never seems so much at one's ease as when one has to play a part. Certainly no one looking at Dorian Gray that night could have believed that he had passed through a tragedy as horrible as any tragedy of our age. Those finely shaped fingers could never have clutched a knife for sin, nor those smiling lips have cried out on God and goodness. He himself cannot help wondering at the calm of his demeanor, and for a moment felt keenly the terrible pleasure of a double life. It was a small party, got up rather in a hurry by Lady Narborough, who was a very clever woman with what Lord Henry used to describe as the remains of a really remarkable ugliness. She had proved an excellent wife to one of her most tedious ambassadors, and had buried her husband properly in a marble mausoleum, which she had herself designed, and married off her daughters to some rich, rather elderly men. She devoted herself now to the pleasures of the French fiction, French cookery, and French esprit, when she could get it. Dorian was one of her especial favorites, and she always told him that she was extremely glad he had not met him in early life. "I know, my dear, I should have fallen madly in love with you," she used to say, "and thrown my bonnet right over the mills for your sake. It is most fortunate that you were not thought of at the time. As it was, our bonnets were so unbecoming, and the mills were so occupied in trying to raise the wind, that I never had a flirtation with anybody. However, that was all Narborough's fault. He was dreadfully short-sighted, and there is no pleasure in taking a husband who never sees anything." Her guests this evening were rather tedious. The fact was, as she explained to Dorian, behind a very shabby fan, one of her married daughters had come up quite suddenly to stay with her, and, to make matters worse, had actually brought her husband with her. "I think it is most unkind of her, my dear," she whispered. "Of course I go and stay with them every summer after I come from Hamburg, but then an old woman like me must have fresh air sometimes. And besides, I really wake them up. You don't know what an existence they lead down there. It is pure unadulterated country life. They get up early because they have so much to do, and go to bed early because they have so little to think about. There has not been a scandal in the neighborhood since the time of Queen Elizabeth, and consequently they all fall asleep after dinner. You shan't sit next to them. You shan't sit next to either of them. You shall sit by me and amuse me." Dorian murmured a graceful compliment and looked around the room. Yes, it certainly was a tedious party. Two of the people he had never seen before, and the other consists of Ernest Harrowden, one of those middle-aged mediocrities so common in London clubs, who have no enemies, but are thoroughly disliked by their friends. Lady Ruxton, an overdressed woman of 47, with a hooked nose, who was always trying to get herself compromised, but was so peculiarly plain that to her great disappointment, no one would ever believe anything against her. Mrs. Erlynne, a pushing nobody, with a delightful lisp and a Venetian red hair. Lady Alice Chapman, his hostess's daughter, a dowdy dull girl with one of those characteristic British faces that, once seen, are never remembered. And her husband, a red-cheeked, white-whiskered creature who, like so many of his class, was under the impression that inordinate jollity can atone for an entire lack of ideas. He was rather sorry he had come to Lady Norborough, looking at the great ormolu gilt clock that sprawled in gaudy curves on the mauve-draped mantelshelf, exclaimed, "How horrid of Henry Wotton to be so late! I sent round to him this morning on chance, and he promised faithfully not to disappoint me." It was some consolation that Harry was to be there, and when the door opened and he heard his slow musical voice, lending charm to some insincere apology, he ceased to feel bored. But at dinner he could not eat anything. Plate after plate went away untasted. Lady Norborough kept scolding him for what she called an insult to poor Adolphe, who invented the menu especially for you. And now and then Lord Henry looked across at him, wondering at his silence and abstract manner. From time to time the butler filled his glass with champagne. He drank eagerly, and his thirst seemed to increase. "Dorian," said Lord Henry at last, as the chaud-froid was being handed around, "what's the matter with you tonight? You are quite out of sorts." "I believe he's in love," cried Lady Norborough, "and that he's afraid to tell me for fear I should be jealous. He's quite right. I certainly should." "Dear Lady Norborough," murmured Dorian, smiling, "I have not been in love for a whole week. Not, in fact, since Madame de Ferrol left town." "How you men can fall in love with that woman," exclaimed the old lady. "I cannot understand it." "It is simply because she remembers you when you were a little girl, Lady Norborough," said Lord Henry. "She's one link between us and your short frocks." "She does not remember my short frocks at all, Lord Henry, but I remember her very well at Vienna 30 years ago, and how décolletée she was then." "She's still décolletée," he answered, taking an olive in his long fingers. And when she is in a very smart gown, she looks like an edition de luxe of a bad French novel. She is really wonderful, and full of surprises. Her capacity for family affection was extraordinary. When her third husband died, her hair turned quite gold from grief. "How can you, Harry?" cried Dorian. "It is a most romantic explanation," he laughed the hostess. "But her third husband, Lord Henry, don't you mean to say Ferrol is the fourth?" "Certainly, Lady Norborough." "I don't believe a word of it." "Well, ask Mr. Gray. He is one of her most intimate friends." "Is it true, Mr. Gray?" "She assures me so, Lady Norborough," said Dorian. "Asked her whether, like Marguerite de Navarre, she had their hearts embalmed and hung at her girdle. She told me she didn't, because none of them had any hearts at all." "4 husbands! Upon my word, that is trop de zèle." "Trop d'audace, I tell her," said Dorian. "Oh, she is audacious enough for anything, my dear. What is Ferrol like? I don't know him." "The husbands of very beautiful women belong to the criminal classes," said Lord Henry, sipping his wine. Lady Norborough hit him with his fan. "Lord Henry, I am not at all surprised that the world says that you are extremely wicked." "But what world says that?" asked Lord Henry, elevating his eyebrows. "It can only be the next world. This world and I are on excellent terms." Everybody I know say that you are very wicked," cried the old lady, shaking her head. Lord Henry looked serious for some moments. "It is perfectly monstrous," he said at last, "the way people go about nowadays, saying things against one behind one's back that are absolutely and entirely true." "Isn't he incorrigible?" cried Dorian, leaning forward in his chair. "I hope so," said the hostess, laughing. "But really, if we all worship Madame de Ferrol in this ridiculous way, I shall have to marry again so as to be in the fashion." "You will never marry again, Lady Norborough," broke in Lord Henry. "You are far too happy. When a woman marries again, it is because she detests her first husband. When a man marries again, it is because he adored his first wife. Women try their luck. Men risk theirs." "Norborough wasn't perfect," cried the old lady. "If he had been, you would not have loved him, my dear lady," was the rejoinder. "Women love us for our defects. If we have enough of them, they will forgive us everything, even our intellects. You will never ask me to dinner again after saying this, I'm afraid. Lady Narborough, but it is quite true. Of course it is true, Lord Henry. If we women did not love you for your defects, where would you all be? Not one of you would ever be married. You would be a set of unfortunate bachelors. Not, however, that would alter you much. Nowadays, all the married men live like bachelors, and all the bachelors like married men. Fin de ciel. Fin de ciel. Ficelle, murmured Lord Henry. Fin de globe, answered the hostess. I wish it were fin de globe, said Dorian with a sigh. Life is a great disappointment. Ah, my dear, cried Lady Narborough, putting on her gloves. Don't tell me that you have exhausted life. When a man says one knows that life has exhausted him. Lord Henry is very wicked, and I sometimes wish that I had been. But you were made to be good. You look so good. I must find you a nice wife. Lord Henry, don't you think that Mr. Grey should get married? I am always telling him so, Lady Narborough, said Lord Henry with a bow. Well, we must look out for a suitable match for him. I shall go through the book carefully tonight, and draw out a list of the eligible young ladies. With their ages, Lady Narborough, asked Dorian. Of course with their ages, slightly edited. But nothing must be done in a hurry. I want it to be what the Morning Post calls a suitable alliance, and I want you both to be happy. What nonsense people talk about happy marriages, exclaimed Lord Henry. A man can be happy with any woman, as long as he does not love her. What a cynic you are, cried the old lady, pushing back her chair and nodding to Lady Ruxton. You must come and dine with me soon again. You are really an admirable tonic, much better than what Sir Andrew prescribed for me. You must tell me what people you would like to meet, though. I want it to be a delightful gathering. I like men who have a future and women who have a past, he answered. Or do you think that it would make it a petticoat party? I fear so, she said, laughing as she stood up. 1,000 pardons, my dear Lady Ruxton, she added. I didn't see you have finished your cigarette. Never mind, Lady Narborough. I smoke a great deal too much, and I'm going to limit myself for the future. Pray don't, Lady Ruxton, said Lord Henry. Moderation is a fatal thing. Enough is as bad as a meal. More than enough is as good as a feast. Lady Ruxton glanced at him curiously. You must come and explain that to me some afternoon, Lord Henry. It sounds a fascinating theory, she murmured, as she swept out of the room. Now, don't you stay too long over your politics and scandals, cried Lady Narborough from the door. If you do, we're sure to squabble upstairs. The men laughed, and Mr. Chapman got up solemnly from the foot of the table and came up to the top. Dorian Gray changed his seat and went to sit by Lord Henry. Mr. Chapman began to talk in a loud voice about the situation in the House of Commons. He guffawed at his adversaries. The word doctrinaire, word full of terror to the British mind, reappeared from time to time between his explosions. An alliterative prefix served as an ornament of oratory. He hoisted the Union Jack on the pinnacles of thought. The inherent stupidity of the race, so in English common sense he jovially termed it, was shown to be the proper bulwark for society. A smile curved Lord Henry's lips, and he turned around to look at Dorian. Are you better, my dear fellow? He asked. You seemed rather out of sorts at dinner. I am quite well, Harry. I am tired, that is all. You were charming last night. The little Duchess is quite devoted to you. She tells me she is going down to Selby. She has promised to come on the 20th. Is Monmouth to be there too? Oh yes, Harry. He bores me dreadfully, almost as much as he bores her. She is very clever, too clever for a woman. She lacks the indefinable charm of weakness. It is the feet of clay that makes the gold of the image precious. Her feet are very pretty, but they are not feet of clay. White porcelain feet, if you like. They have been through a fire, and what fire does not destroy, it hardens. She has had many experiences. How long has she been married? Asked Dorian. An eternity, she tells me. I believe, according to the peerage, it is 10 years, but 10 years with Monmouth must have been like an eternity, with time thrown in. Who else is coming? Oh, the Willoughbys, Lord Rugby and his wife, our hostess, Geoffrey Colston, the usual set. I have asked Lord Grochain. I like him, said Lord Henry. A great many people don't, but I find him charming. He atones for being occasionally somewhat overdressed, but being always absolutely overeducated. He is a very modern type. I don't know if he will be able to come, Harry. He may have to go to Monte Carlo with his father. Ah, what a nuisance people's people are. Try to make him come. By the way, Dorian, you ran off very early last night. You left before 11. What did you do afterwards? Did you go straight home? Dorian glanced at him hurriedly and frowned. No, Harry, he said at last. I did not get home until nearly 3. Did you go to the club? Yes, he answered. Then he bit his lip. No, I don't mean that. I didn't go to the club. I walked about. I forget what I did. How inquisitive you are, Harry. You always want to know what one has been doing. I always want to forget what I have been doing. I came in at 2:30, if you wish to know the exact time. I had left my latchkey at home, and my servant had to let me in. If you want any corroborative evidence on the subject, you can ask him. Lord Henry shrugged his shoulders. My dear fellow, as if I cared. Let's go up to the drawing room. No sherry, thank you. Mr. Chapman, something has happened to you, Dorian. Tell me what it is. You're not yourself tonight. Don't mind me, Harry. I am irritable and out of temper. I shall come around and see you tomorrow, or next day. Make my excuses to Lady Narborough. I shan't go upstairs. I shall go home. I must go home. All right, Dorian. I dare say I shall see you tomorrow at tea time. The Duchess is coming. I will try to be there, Harry, he said, leaving the room. As he drove back to his own house, he was conscious that the sense of terror he had thought he had strangled had come back to him. Lord Henry's casual questioning had made him lose nerves for the moment. He wanted his nerves still. Things that were dangerous had to be destroyed. He winced. He hated the idea of even touching them. Yet it had to be done. He realized that, when he had locked the door of his library, he opened the secret press into which he had thrusted Basil Hallward's coat and bag. A huge fire was blazing. He piled another log on it. The smell of the singed clothes and burning leather was horrible. It took him 3/4 of an hour to consume everything. At the end he felt faint and sick, and having lit some Algerian pastels in a pierced copper brazier, he bathed his hands and forehead with a cool musk-scented vinegar. Suddenly he started. His eyes grew strangely bright, and he gnawed nervously at his underlip. Between 2 of the windows stood a large Florentine cabinet made out of ebony and inlaid with ivory and blue lapis. He watched it as though it were a thing that could fascinate and make you afraid, as though it held something that he longed for and yet almost loathed. His breath quickened. A mad craving came over him. He lit a cigarette and threw it away. His eyelids drooped until the long fringed lashes almost touched his cheek. But he still watched the cabinet. At last he got up from the sofa on which he had been lying and went over to it, and having unlocked it, touched some hidden spring. A triangular drawer passed slowly out. His fingers moved instinctively towards it, dipped in, and closed on something. It was a small Chinese box of black and gold dust lacquer, elaborately wrought, the sides patterned with curved waves, and the silken cord hung with round crystals and tasseled and pleated metal threads. He opened it. Inside was a green paste, waxy and lustrous, the odor curiously heavy and persistent. He hesitated for some moments with a strange, immobile smile upon his face, then shivered. Though the atmosphere of the room was terribly hot, he drew himself up and glanced at the clock. It was 20 minutes to 12. He put the box back, shutting the cabinet door as he did so, and went to his room. As midnight was striking, bronze blows up this dusty air. Dorian Gray, dressed commonly and with a muffler wrapped around his throat, crept quietly out of his house. In Bond Street, he found a hansom with a good horse. He hailed it, and in a low voice gave the driver an address. The man shook his head. "It is too far for me," he murmured. "Here's a sovereign for you," said Dorian. "You shall have another if you drive fast." All right, sir, answered the man. He will be there in an hour. And after his fare had gone in, he turned the horse around and drove rapidly towards the river. Chapter 26. No, chapter 16. Oh gosh, I kept saying 26 and 16. My goodness. They're in room. The chapter numbers are in Roman numerals. So. It's a bot. Oh no! Already. I am not even a half an hour in. Bot, what are you? Disgusting. We got bots. We got bots. Destroy the bots. Oh. Destroy the bots. We haven't even been a half an hour into the stream and we got bots. Disgusting. I hate bots. I hate bots with a bleeding passion. Ugh, gross. Why are they here? Disgusting. Okay. Let's see. Chapter 16. A cold rain began to fall, and the blurred street lamps looked ghastly in their dripping mist. The public houses were just closing, and dim men and women were clustered in broken groups around their doors. From some of the bars came the sound of horrible laughter. In others, drunkards brawled and screamed. Lying back in the hansom, with his hat pulled over his forehead, Dorian Gray watched with listless eyes the sordid shame of the great city, and now and then he repeated to himself the words that Lord Henry had said to him on the first day he had met. To cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. Yes, that was the secret. He had often tried it, and would try it again now. There are opium dens where one could buy oblivion. Dens of horror where the memory of old sins could be destroyed by the madness of sins that were new. The moon hung low in the sky like a yellow skull. From time to time, a huge misshapen cloud stretched a long arm across and hid it. The gas lamps grew fewer, and the streets more narrow and gloomy. Once the man lost his way and had to drive back half a mile. A steam rose from the horse as it splashed up the puddles. The side windows of the hansom were clogged with a gray flannel mist. The cure of the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. How the words rang in his ears! His soul, certainly, was sick to death. Was it true that the senses could cure it? Innocent blood had been spilled. What could atone for that? For that there was no atonement. But though forgiveness was impossible, forgetfulness was possible still. And he was determined to forget, to stamp the thing out, to crush it as one would crush the adder that had stung one. Indeed, what right had Basil to have spoken to him as he had done? Who made him a judge over others? He had said things that were dreadful, horrible, not to be endured. On and on plodded the hansom, going slower, it seemed to him, at each step. He thrust up the trap and called the man to drive faster. The hideous hunger for opium began to gnaw at him. His throat burned and his delicate hands twitched nervously together. He shook at the horse madly with his stick. The driver laughed and whipped up. He laughed in answer, and the man was silent. The way seemed interminable, and the streets like the black web of some sprawling spider. The monotony became unbearable, and as the mist thickened, he felt afraid. Then they passed by lonely brick fields. The fog was lighter here, and he could see the strange bottle-shaped kilns with their orange fan-like tongues of fire. A dog barked as they went by, and far away in the darkness some wandering seagull screamed. The horse stumbled to a rut, then swerved aside and broke into a gallop. After some time, they left the clay road and rattled again over rough paven streets. Most of the windows were dark, and now and then a fantastic shadow was silhouetted against some lamplit blind. He watched them curiously. They moved like monstrous marionettes and made gestures like live things. He hated them. A dull rage was in his heart. As they turned a corner, a woman yelled something at them from an open door, and two men ran after the hansom for about 100 yards. The driver beat at them with his whip. It is said that passion makes one think in a circle. Certainly, with a hideous iteration at the bitten lip of Dorian Gray, shaped and reshaped those subtle words that dealt with soul and sense, till he had found in them the full expression, as it were, of his mood, and justified, by intellectual approval, passions that without such justification would have dominated his temper. From cell to cell of his brain crept the one thought, and the wild desire to live, most terrible of all man's appetites, quickened with force each trembling nerve and fiber. Ugliness that had once been hateful to him, because it made things real, became dear to him now for the very reason. Ugliness was the one reality. The coarse brawl, the loathsome dead, the crude violence of disordered life, the very vileness of thief and outcast, were more vivid in their intense actuality of impressions, and that all the gracious shapes of art, the dreamy shadows of song. They were what he needed for forgetfulness. In 3 days he would be free. Suddenly, the man drew up with a jerk at the top of a dark lane. Over the low roofs and jagged chimney stacks of the houses rose the black masts of ships. Wreaths of white mist clung like ghostly sails into the yards. "Somewhere around here, sir, ain't it?" said he asked huskily through the trap. Dorian started and peered around. "This will do," he answered, and having gotten out hastily and given the driver an extra fare he had promised him, he walked quickly to the direction of the quay. Here and there a lantern gleamed at the stern of some huge merchantman. The light shook and splintered into puddles. A red glare came from an outward-bound steamer that was coaling. The slimy pavement looked like a wet mackintosh. He hurried onward to left, glancing back now and then to see if he was being followed. About 7 or 8 minutes he reached a small shabby house that was wedged in between two gaunt factories. In one of the top windows stood a lamp. He stopped and gave a peculiar knock. After a little time he heard steps in the passage, and the chain began being unhooked. The door opened quietly, and he went in without saying a word to the squat misshapen figure that flattened itself into the shadows as he passed. At the end of the hall hung a tattered green curtain that swayed and shook in the gusty wind which had followed him in for the street. He dragged it aside and entered a long, low room, which looked as if it had once been a third-rate dancing saloon. Shrill, flaring gas jets, dulled and distorted into the fly-blown mirrors that faced them, were ranged around walls. Greasy reflectors of rib-tinned black backed them, making quivering discs of light. The floor was covered with ochre-colored sawdust, trampled here and there into mud, and stained with dark rings of spilled liquor. Some Malays were crouched by a little charcoal stove, playing with bone counters and showing their white teeth as they chattered. In one corner, with a head buried in his arms, a sailor sprawled over a table, and by the tawdrily painted bar that ran across one complete side stood two haggard women, mocking an old man who was brushing the sleeve of his coat with an expression of disgust. "He'd think he's got red ants on him," laughed one of them, as Dorian passed by. The man looked at her in terror and began to whimper. At the end of the room there was a little staircase, leading to a darkened chamber. As Dorian hurried up its 3 rickety steps, the heavy odor of opium met him. He heaved a deep breath, and his nostrils quivered with pleasure. When he entered, a young man with a smooth yellow hair, who was bending over a lamp lighting a long thin pipe, looked up at him and nodded in a hesitant manner. "You here, Adrian?" murmured Dorian. Where else should I be?" he answered listlessly. "One of the chaps will speak to me now." "I thought you had left England." "Darlington is not going to do anything. My brother paid the bill at last. George doesn't speak to me either. I don't care," he added with a sigh. "As long as one has this stuff, one doesn't want friends. think I have had too many friends. Doreen winced and looked around at the grotesque things that lay in such fantastic postures on ragged mattresses, the twisted limbs, the gaping mouths, the staring, lusterless eyes, fascinated him. He knew in what strange heaven they were suffering, and what dull hells they were teaching them the secrets of some new joy. They were better off than he was. He was prisoned in thought. Memory, like a horrible malady, was eating away at his soul. From time to time he seemed to see the eyes of Basil Howard looking at him, yet he felt he could not stay. The presence of Adrian Singleton troubled him. He wanted to be where no one would know who he was. He wanted to escape from himself. I'm going on to the other place, he said after a pause. On the wharf? Yes. That mad cat is sure to be there. They won't have her in this place now. Dorian shrugged his shoulders. I am sick of women who love one. Women who hate one are much more interesting. Besides, the stuff is better. Much the same. I like it better. Come and have something to drink. I must have something. What the hell? Why are there so many bots today? What is this? Remove. Report. Remove. Report to remove. Get them out of here. Why do we have these? Get out of here. Get out of here. I look up just to see more bots just popping in. Why are there so many bots today? Why are there so many bots? It's like they're hunting for me. It's disgusting. No one wants to find sexy, desperate singles in anyone's area or live video chats. Who cares? No one wants that. Disgusting. Disgusting. Okay, where was I? I don't want anything, murmured the young man. Never mind. Adrian Singleton rose up wearily and followed Dorian to the bar. At half-caste, in a ragged turban, in a shabby ulster, grinned a hideous greeting as he thrust a bottle of brandy and 2 tumblers in front of them. The women sidled up and began to chatter. Dorian turned his back on them and said something in a low voice to Adrian Singleton. A crooked smile, like a Malay crease, writhed across the face of one of the women. We are very proud tonight, she sneered. Oh, for God's sakes, don't talk to me, cried Dorian, stamping his foot on the ground. What do you want? Money? Here it is. Don't ever talk to me again. 2 red sparks flashed for a moment in the woman's sudden eyes, then flickered out and left them dull and glazed. She tossed her head and raked the coins off the counter with greedy fingers. Her companion watched her enviously. It's no use, sighed Adrian Singleton. I don't care to go back. What does it matter? I'm quite happy here. Will you write to me if you want anything? You will write to me if you want anything, won't you? Said Dorian after a pause. Perhaps. Good night, then. Good night, answered the young man, passing up the steps and wiping up his parched mouth with a handkerchief. Dorian walked to the door with a look of pain in his face. As he drew the curtain aside, a hideous laugh broke from the painted lips of the woman who had taken his money. There goes the devil's bargain, she hiccuped with a hoarse voice. Curse you, he answered. Don't call me that. She snapped her fingers. Prince Charming is what you like to be called, ain't it? She yelled after him. The drowsy sailor leapt to his feet as she spoke and looked wildly around. The sound of the shutting of the hall door fell on his ears. He rushed out as if in pursuit. Dorian Gray hurried along the quay through the drizzling rain. His meeting with Adrian Singleton had strangely moved him, and he had wondered if the ruin of that young life was really to be laid at his door, as Basil Howard had said to him, with such infamy of insult. He bit his lip, and for a few seconds his eyes grew sad. Yet after all, what did it matter to him? One's days were too brief to take the burden of another's errors on one's shoulder. Each man lived his own life and paid his own price for living it. The only pity was one had to pay so often for a single fault. One had to pay over and over again indeed. In her dealings with man, destiny never closed her accounts. There are moments, psychologist tells us, where the passion for sin, or for what the world calls sin, so dominates a nature that every fiber of the body, as every cell of the brain, seems to be instinct with fearful impulses. Men and women at such moments lose the freedom of their will. They move to their terrible end as automatons move. Choices taken from them and conscience is either killed off, or, if it lives at all, lives but to give rebellion its fascination and disobedience its charms. For all sins, as theologians were weary not of reminding us, are sins of disobedience. When was that high spirit, that morning star of evil, fell from heaven? It was in rebel that he fell. Callous, concentrated on evil, with stained mind and soul, hungry for rebellion, Dorian Gray hastened on, quickening his step as he went, but as he darted aside into a dim archway that had served him often as a short-cut to the ill-famed place where he was going, he felt himself suddenly seized from behind, and before he had time to defend himself, was thrust back against the wall with a brutal hand around his throat. He struggled madly for life, and He struggled madly for life, and by terrible effort wrenched the tightened fingers away. In a second he heard a click of a revolver and saw the gleam of a polished barrel pointing straight at his head, and the dusky form of a short, thick-set man facing him. "What do you want?" he gasped. "Keep quiet," said the man. "If you stir, I'll shoot you." "You are mad. What have I done to you?" "You wrecked the life of Sybil Vane," was the answer. "And Sybil Vane was my sister. She killed herself. I know it. Her death is at your door. I swore I would kill you in return. For years I have sought you. I had no clue, no trace. The two people who could have described you were dead. I knew nothing of you but the pet name she used to call you. I heard it tonight by chance. Make your peace with God, for tonight you are going to die." Dorian Gray grew sick with fear. "I never knew her," he stammered. "I never heard of her. You are mad." "You had better confess your sins, for as sure as I am James Vane, you are going to die." It was a horrible moment. Dorian did not know what to say or do. "Down on your knees," he growled the man. "I give you 1 minute to make your peace, no more. I go on board tonight for India, and I must do my job first. 1 minute, that is all." Dorian's arms fell to his side. Paralyzed with terror, he did not know what to do. Suddenly, a wild hope flashed across his brain. "Stop!" he cried. "How long ago is it since your sister died? Quick, tell me." 18 years, said the man. "Why do you ask me? What do years matter?" 18 years, laughed Dorian Gray with a touch of triumph in his voice. 18 years! Set me under the lamp and look at my face." James Vane hesitated for a moment, not understanding what he meant. Then he seized Dorian Gray and dragged him from the archway. Dim and wavering was the wind-blown light, yet it served to show him the hideous error, as it seemed, to which he had fallen, for the face of the man he had sought to kill had all the bloom of boyhood and the unstained purity of youth. He seemed a little more than a lad of 20 summers, hardly older, if older indeed at all, than his sister had been when they had parted so many years ago. It was obvious that this was not the man who had destroyed her life. He loosened his hold and reeled back. My God, he cried, and I would have murdered you." Dorian Gray drew a long breath. "You have been on the brink of committing a terrible crime, my man," he said, looking at him sternly. "Let this be a warning to you not to take vengeance into your own hands." "Forgive me, sir," murmured James Vane. "I was deceived. A chance word I heard in that damned den set me on the wrong track." "You had better go home and put that pistol away, or you may get into trouble," said Dorian, turning on his heel and going slowly down the street. James Vane stood on the pavement in horror. He was trembling from head to toe. After a little while, a black shadow that had been creeping along the dripping wall moved out into the light and came close to him with stealthy footsteps. He felt a hand laid on his arm and looked around with a start. It was one of the women who had been drinking at the bar. Why didn't you kill him?" she hissed out, putting her haggard face close to his. "I knew you were following him when you rushed out from Dally's. You fool, you should have killed him. He has lots of money, and he's as bad as bad." "He's not the man I'm looking for," he answered, "and I want no man's money. I want a man's life. The man whose life I want must be nearly 40 by now. This one is a little more than a boy. Thank God I have not got his blood upon my hands." The woman gave a bitter laugh. "A little more than a boy," she sneered. "Why, man, it's nigh on 18 years since Prince Charming made me what I am." "You lied," cried James Vane. She raised her hand up to heaven. "Before God, I am telling the truth," she cried. "Before God? Strike me dumb if it ain't so. He is the worst one that comes here. They say he has sold himself to the devil for a pretty face. It's nigh on 18 years since I've met him. He hasn't changed much since then. I have, though," she added, with a sickly leer. "You swear this?" "I swear it," came a hoarse echo from her flat mouth. "But don't give me way to him," she whined. "I'm afraid of him. Let me have some money for my night's lodging." He broke from her with an oath and rushed to the corner of the street, but Dorian Gray had disappeared. When he looked back, the woman had vanished also. Chapter 17. A week later, Dorian Gray was sitting in the conservatory at Selby Royal, talking to the pretty Duchess of Monmouth, who, with her husband, a jaded-looking man of 60, was amongst his guests. It was tea time, and the mellow light of the huge lace-covered lamp that stood on the table lit up the delicate china and hammered silver of the service at which the Duchess was presiding. Her white hands were moving daintily among the cups, and her full red lips were smiling at something that Dorian had whispered to her. Lord Henry was lying back in a silk-draped wicker chair, looking at them. On a peach-covered divan sat Lady Narborough, pretending to listen to the Duke's description of the last Brazilian beetle that he had added to his collection. 3 young men in elaborate smoking suits were handing tea cakes to some of the women. The house party consisted of 12 people, and there were more expected to arrive than on the next day. "What are you two talking about?" said Lord Henry, strolling over to the table and putting his cup down. "I hope Dorian has told you about my plan for rechristening everything, Gladys. It is a delightful idea." "But I don't want to be rechristened, Harry," rejoined the Duchess, looking up at him with her wonderful eyes. "I am quite satisfied with my own name, and I am sure Mr. Gray would be satisfied with his." "My dear Gladys, I would not alter either name for the world. They are both perfect. I was thinking chiefly of flowers. Yesterday I cut an orchid for my buttonhole. It was a marvelous spotted thing, as effective as the 7 deadly sins. In a thoughtless moment, I asked one of the gardeners what it was called. He told me it was a fine specimen of Robinsoniana, or something dreadful of that kind. It is a sad truth, but we have lost the faculty of giving lovely names to things. Names are everything. I never quarrel with action. My one quarrel is with words. That is the reason I hate vulgar realism in literature. The man who could call a spade should be compelled to use one. It is the only thing he is fit for." "Then what shall we call you, Harry?" she asked. "His name is Prince Paradox," said Dorian. "I recognize him in a flash," exclaimed the Duchess. "I won't hear of it," laughed Lord Henry, sinking into a chair. "From a label there is no escape. I refuse the title." "Royalties may not abdicate," fell a warning from pretty lips. "You wish me to defend my throne, then?" "Yes. I give the truth of tomorrow." "I prefer the mistakes of today," she answered. "You disarm me, Gladys," he cried, catching the willfulness of her mood. "Of your shield, Harry, not of your spear." "I never tilt against beauty," he said, with a wave of his hand. "That is your error, Harry. Believe me, you value beauty far too much." "How can you say that? I admit I think that it is better to be beautiful than to be good. But on the other hand, no one is more ready than I am to acknowledge that it is better to be good than to be ugly." "Ugliness is one of the 7 deadly sins, then," cried the Duchess. "What becomes of your simile about the orchid?" "Ugliness is one of the 7 deadly virtues, Gladys. You, as a good Tory, must not underrate them. Beer, the Bible, and the 7 deadly virtues have made our England what she is. You don't like your country, then? She asked. I live in it. That you may censure it the better. That you may censure it the better. Would you have me take the verdict of Europe on it? He inquired. What do they say of us? That Tartuffe has immigrated to England and opened a shop. Is that yours, Harry? I give it to you. I could not use it. It is too true. You need not be afraid. Our countrymen never recognize a description. They are practical. They are more cunning than practical. When they make up their ledger, they balance stupidly by wealth and vice by hypocrisy. Still, we have done great things. Great things have been thrust onto us, Gladys. We have carried the burden only as far as the stock exchange. She shook her head. I believe in the race, she cried. It represents the survival of the pushing. It has development. Decay fascinates me more. What of art? She asked. It is a malady. Love? An illusion. Religion? The fashionable substitute for belief. You are a skeptic. Never. Skepticism is the beginning of faith. What are you? To define to its limit. Give me a clue. Thread snap. You would lose your way in the labyrinth. You bewilder me. Let us talk of someone else. Our host is a delightful topic. Years ago, he was christened the Prince Charming. Ah, don't remind me of that, cried Dorian Gray. Our host is rather horrid this evening, cried the Duchess, coloring. I believe he thinks that Mammoth married me on purely scientific principle at the best specimen he could find of modern butterfly. Well, I hope he won't stick pins into you, Duchess, laughed Dorian. Oh, my maid does that already, Mr. Gray, but she is annoyed with me. And what does she get annoyed with you about, Duchess? For the most trivial things, Mr. Gray, I assure you. Usually because I come in at 10 minutes to 9 and tell her that I must be dressed by 8:30. How unreasonable of her. You should give her a warning. I daren't, Mr. Gray. Why, she invents hats for me. You remember the one I wore at Lady Hillstone's garden party, don't you? But it was nice of you to pretend that you do. Oh, you don't, but it's nice of you to pretend that you do. Well, she made it out of nothing. All good heads are made of nothing. Like all good reputations, Gladys, interrupted Lord Henry. Every effect that one produces gives one an enemy. To be popular, one must be a mediocrity. Not with women, said the Duchess, shaking her head. And women rule the world. I assure you we can't bear mediocrities. We women, as someone says, love with our ears, just as you men love with your eyes, if you ever love at all. It seems to me that we never do anything else, murmured Dorian. Ah, then you never really love, Mr. Gray, answered the Duchess with mock sadness. My dear Gladys, cried Lord Henry, how can you say that? Romance lives by reception, and repetition converts an appetite into art. Besides, each time that one loves is the only time one has ever loved. Difference of object does not alter singleness of passion. It merely intensifies it. We can have in life but one great experience at best, and the secret of life is to reproduce that experience as often as possible. Even if one has been wounded by it, Harry, asked the Duchess after a pause. Especially when one has been wounded by it, answered Lord Henry. The Duchess turned and looked at Dorian Gray with curious expression in her eyes. What do you say to that, Mr. Gray? She inquired. Dorian hesitates for a moment. Then he threw his head back and laughed. I always agree with Harry, Duchess. Even when he is wrong? Harry is never wrong, Duchess. And does his philosophy make you happy? I have never searched for happiness. Who wants happiness? I have searched for pleasure. And found it, Mr. Gray. Often, too often. Hi, Wasabi! Welcome back! Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, friend. I hope you're doing well. The Duchess sighed. I am searching for peace, she said. And if I don't go and dress, I shall have none this evening. Let me get you some orchids, Duchess, cried Dorian, starting to his feet and walking down the conservatory. You are flirting disgracefully with him, said Lord Henry to his cousin. Better take care. He is very fascinating. If he were not, then there would be no battle. Greek makes Greek, then. I am on the side of Trojans. They fought for a woman. They were defeated. There are worse things than capture, she answered. You gallop with a loose rein. Pace gives life, was the riposte. Shall I write it in my diary tonight? What? That a burnt child loves the fire. I am not even singed. My wings are untouched. Use them for everything except flight. Courage has been passed from men to women. It is a new experience for us. You have a rival. Who? He laughed. Lady Narborough, he whispered. She perfectly adores him. You fill me with apprehension. The appeal to antiquity is fatal to us who are romanticists. Romanticists, you have all the methods of science. Men have educated us, but not explaining to you. Describe us as a sex, was her challenge. Sphinxes without secrets. She looked at him, smiling. How long Mr. Grey is, she said. Let us go and help him. I have not yet told him the color of my frock. Ah, you must suit your frock to his flowers, Gladys. That would be a premature surrender. Romantic art begins with its climax. I must keep an opportunity for retreat. In the Parthian manner. They found safety in the desert. I could not do that. Women are not always allowed a choice, he answered. But he hardly finished the sentence before from the far end of the conservatory came a stifled groan, followed by the dull sound of a heavy fall. Everybody started up. The Duchess stood motionless in horror. With fear in his eyes, Lord Henry rushed to the flapping palms to find Dorian Gray lying face down on the tiled floor in a death-like swoon. He was carried at once into the blue drawing room and laid upon one of the sofas. After a short time he came to himself and looked around with a dazed expression. What has happened? He asked. Oh, I remember. Am I safe here, Dorian? Am I safe here, Harry? He began to tremble. My dear Dorian, he answered Lord Henry. You merely fainted. That was all. You must have overtired yourself. You had better not come down to dinner. I will take your place. No, I will come down, he said, struggling to his feet. I would rather come down. I must not be alone. He went to his room and dressed. There was a wild recklessness of gaiety in his manner as he sat at the table, but now and then a thrill of terror ran through him. He remembered that, pressed against the window of the conservatory like a white handkerchief, he had seen the face of James Vine watching him. You're doing great, Wasabi. That's great. I'm glad you're doing well, my friend. I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad you're doing well. I'm happy to hear that. I hope you're enjoying the story. We're almost done. We only have a few more chapters left. I hope you're enjoying it. Chapter 18. The next day he did not leave the house, and, indeed, spent most of the time in his own room, sick with a wild terror of dying, yet indifferent to life itself. The consciousness of being hunted, snared, and tracked down, had begun to dominate him. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, excuse me. If the tapestry did but tremble in the wind, he shook. The dead leaves that were blown against the leaded panes seemed to him like his own wasted resolutions and wild regrets. He closed his eyes. He saw again the sailor's face peering through the mist-stained glass, and horror seemed once more to lay his hand upon his heart. But perhaps it had only been his fancy that had called vengeance out of the night and set the hideous shapes of punishment before him. Actual life was chaos, but there was something terribly logical in the imagination. It was the imagination that set remorse to dog the feet of sin. It was imagination that made each crime bear its misshapen brood. In the common world of fact, the wicked were not punished, nor the good rewarded. Success was given to the strong, failure thrust upon the weak. That was all. Besides, had any stranger been prowling around the house, he would have been seen by the servants or the keepers. Had any footmarks been found on the flower beds, the gardeners would have reported it. Yes, it had been merely fancy. Sylvain's brother had not come back to kill him. He had sailed away in his ship to founder in some winter sea. From him at any rate, he was safe. Why, the man did not know who he was. He could not know who he was. The mask of youth had saved him. And yet if it had been merely an illusion, how terrible it was to think that conscience could raise such fearful phantoms, and give them visible form and make them move before one. What sort of life would his be if, day and night, shadows of his crimes were to peer at him from silent corners, to mock him from secret places, to whisper in his ears as he sat at the feast, to wake him with icy fingers as he lay asleep? As the thought crept over his brain, he grew pale with terror, and the air seemed to him to have become suddenly colder. Near the dory end. Ha 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 ha! That's a good one. That's a good one, Wasabi. I like that one. That's funny. That's actually really funny. 10 out of 10. Great pun. You already know I love me a good pun. So 10 out of 10. That was chef's kiss. As the thought crept through his brain, he grew pale with terror, and air seemed to him to have suddenly to become suddenly colder. Oh, what a wild hour of madness! In what a wild hour of madness he had killed his friend. How ghastly the mere memory of the scene! He saw it all again. Each hideous detail came back to him with added horror. Out of the black cave of time, terrible and swathed in scarlet, rose the image of his sin. When Lord Henry came in at 6 o'clock, he found him crying of one whose heart will break. It was not until the third day he ventured to go out. There was something in the clear, pine-scented air of that winter morning that seemed to bring him back to his joyousness and his ardor for life. But it was not merely the physical conditions of environment that had caused the change. His own nature had revolted against the excess of anguish that had sought to maim and mar the perfection of his calm. With subtle and fine-wrought temperaments, it is always so. Their strong passions must either bruise or bend. They either slay the man or themselves die. Shallow sorrows and shallow loves live on. The loves and sorrows that are great are destroyed by their own plenitude. Besides, he had convinced himself that he had been the victim of a terror-stricken imagination, and looked back now on his fears with something of pity and not a little of contempt. After breakfast, he walked with the Duchess for an hour in the garden and then drove across the park to join the shooting party. The crisp frost lay like salt upon the grass. The sky was an inverted cup of blue metal. A thin film of ice bordered the flat, reed-grown lake. At the corner of the pine wood, he caught the sight of Sir Geoffrey Clouston, the Duchess' brother, jerking 2 spent cartridges out of his gun. He jumped up from the cart, and having told the groom to take the mare home, made his way towards the guest through the withered bracken and rough undergrowth. "Have you been a good sport, Geoffrey?" he asked. "Not very good, Dorian. I think most of the birds have gone to the open. I dare say they will be better after lunch, when we get to new ground." Excuse me. Dorian strolled along by his side. The keen aromatic air, the brown and red lights that glimmered in the wood, the hoarse cries of the beaters ringing out from time to time, and the sharp snaps of the gun that followed, fascinated him and filled him with a sense of delightful freedom. He was dominated by the carelessness of happiness, by the high indifference of joy. Suddenly, from a lumpy tussock of old grass some 20 yards in front of them, with black-tipped ears erect and long hinder libs thrown forward, darted a hare. It bolted for a thicket of alders. Sir Geoffrey put his gun to his shoulder, but there was something in the animal's grace of movement that strangely charmed Dorian Gray, and he cried out at once, "Don't shoot it, Geoffrey. Let it live." "What nonsense, Dorian," laughed his companion, and as the hare bounded into the thicket, he fired. There were 2 cries heard, the cry of a hare in pain, which is dreadful, and the cry of a man in agony, which is worse. "Good heavens, I've hit a beater!" exclaimed Geoffrey. What an ass the man was to get in front of the guns. "Stop shooting there," he called out at the top of his voice. "A man is hurt." The headkeeper came running with a stick in his hand. Where, sir? Where is he? He shouted. At the same time, the firing ceased along the line. Here, answered Sir Geoffrey angrily, hurrying towards the thicket. Why on earth do you keep your men back? Spoiled my shooting for the day. Dorian watched them as they plunged into the outer clump, brushing the lithe, swinging branches aside. In a few moments, they emerged, dragging the body after them into the sunlight. He turned away in horror. It seemed to him that the misfortune followed wherever he went. He heard Sir Geoffrey ask if the man was really dead, and the affirming answer of the keeper. The wood seemed to him to have become suddenly alive with faces. There was a trampling of myriad feet and a low buzz of voices. A great copper-breasted pheasant came beating through the boughs overhead. After a few moments that were to him, in his perturbed state, like an endless hours of pain, he felt a hand laid on his shoulder. He started and looked around. Dorian, said Lord Henry, I had better tell them that the shooting is stopped for today. It would not look well to go on. I wish it were stopped forever, Henry, as he answered bitterly. The whole thing is hideous and cruel. It's the man. He could not finish the sentence. I'm afraid so, rejoined Lord Henry. He's got the whole charge of shot in his chest. He must have died almost instantaneously. Come, let us go home. They walked side by side in the direction of the avenue for nearly 50 yards without speaking. Then Dorian looked at Lord Henry and said, with a heavy sigh, It is a bad omen, Harry. A very bad omen. What is? Asked Lord Henry. Oh, this accident, I suppose. My dear fellow, it can't be helped. It was the man's own fault. Why did he get in front of the guns? Besides, it's nothing to us. It is rather awkward for Geoffrey, of course. It does not do to pepper beaters. It makes people think that one is a wild shot. And Geoffrey is not. He shoots very straight. But there is no use talking about the matter. Dorian shook his head. It is a bad omen, Harry. I feel as if something horrible was going to happen to some of us. To myself, perhaps, he added, passing a hand over his eyes with a gesture of pain. The elder man laughed. The only horrible thing in the world is ennui, Dorian. That is one of sins for which there is no forgiveness. But we are not likely to suffer from it unless these fellows kept chattering about this thing at dinner. I must tell them that the subject is to be tabooed. As for omens, there is no such thing as an omen. Destiny does not send us heralds. She is too wise or too cruel for that. Besides, what on earth could happen to you, Dorian? You have everything in the world that a man can want. There is no one who would not be delighted to change places with you. There is one with whom I would not change places, Harry. Don't laugh like that. I am telling you the truth. The wretched peasant who had just died is better off than I am. I have no terror of death. It is the coming of death that terrifies me. Its monstrous wings seem to wheel in the leaden air around me. Good heavens! Don't you see a man moving behind the trees there, watching me, waiting for me? Lord Henry looked in the direction in which the trembling gloved hand was pointing. Yes, he said, smiling. I see the gardener waiting for you. I suppose he wants to ask you what flowers you wish to have on the table tonight. How absurdly nervous you are, my dear fellow. You must come and see my doctor when we get back to town. Dorian heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the gardener approaching. The man touched his hat, glanced for a moment at Lord Henry in a hesitant manner, and then produced a letter, in which he handed his master. Her Grace told me to wait for an answer, he murmured. Dorian put the letter into his pocket. Tell Her Grace that I am coming in, he said coldly. The man turned round and went rapidly into the direction of the house. How fond women are of doing dangerous things, laughed Lord Henry. It is one of the qualities in them in which I admire most. A woman will flirt with anybody in the world as long as the other people are looking on. How fond of you are saying dangerous things, Harry. In the present instance, you are quite astray. I like the Duchess very much, but I don't love her. And the Duchess loves you very much, but she likes you less, so you are excellently matched. You are talking scandal, Harry. There is never any basis for scandal. The basis of every scandal is an immoral certainty, said Lord Henry, lighting a cigarette. You would sacrifice anybody, Harry, for the sake of an epigram. The world goes to the altar of its own accord, was the answer. I wish I could love, cried Dorian Gray, with a deep note of pathos in his voice. But I seem to have lost the passion and forgotten the desire. I'm much too concentrated on myself. My own personality has become a burden to me. I want to escape, to go away, to forget. It was silly of me to have come down here at all. I think I should send a wire to Harvey to have the yacht got ready. On a yacht one is safe. Safe from what, Dorian? You are in some trouble. Why not tell me what it is? You know I would help you. I can't tell you, Harry, he answered sadly, and I dare say it's the only a fancy of mine. This unfortunate accident has upset me. I have a horrible presentiment of that something of the kind may happen to me. What nonsense. I hope it is, but I can't help feeling it. Ah, there's the Duchess, looking like Artemis in a tailor-made gown. You see we have come back, Duchess. I've heard all about it, Mr. Gray, she answered. Poor Joffrey is terribly upset, and it seems that you asked him not to shoot the hare. How curious. Yes, it was very curious. I don't know what made me say it. Some whim, I suppose. It looked the loveliest of little live things. But I am sorry they told you about the man. It is a hideous subject. It is an annoying subject, broke in Lord Henry. It has no psychological value at all. Now, if Geoffrey had done the thing on purpose, how interesting he would be. I should like to know someone who has committed a real murder. How horrid of you, Harry, cried the Duchess. Isn't it, Mr. Gray? Harry, Mr. Gray is ill again. He's going to faint. Dorian drew himself up with an effort and smiled. It is nothing, Duchess, he murmured. My nerves are dreadfully out of order, that is all. I'm afraid I walked too far this morning. I didn't hear what Harry said. Was I very bad? You must tell me some other time. I think I must go and lie down. You will excuse me, won't you? They had reached a great flight of steps that led from the conservatory out onto the terrace. As the glass door closed behind Dorian, Lord Henry turned and looked at the Duchess with slumberous eyes. Are you very much in love with him? He asked. She did not answer for some time, but stood gazing at the landscape. I wish I knew, she said at last. He shook his head. Knowledge would be fatal. It is the uncertainty that charms one. A mist makes things wonderful. One may lose one's way. All the ways end at the same point, my dear Gladys. What is that? Disillusion. It was my debut in life, she sighed. They came to you crowned. I am tired of strawberry leaves. They become you. Only in public. You would miss them, said Lord Henry. I will not part with a petal. My mouth has ears. Old age is dull of hearing. Has he never been jealous? I wish he had been. He glanced about as if in search for something. What are you looking for? She inquired. The button from your foil, he answered. You have dropped it. She laughed. I still have the mask. It makes your eyes lovelier, was his reply. She laughed again. Her teeth showed like white seeds in a scarlet fruit. Upstairs in his own room, Dorian Gray was lying on a sofa, with terror in every tingling fiber of his body. Life had suddenly become too hideous a burden for him to bear. The dreadful death of the unlucky beater, shot in a thicket like a wild animal, had seemed to him to prefigure death for himself also. He had nearly swooned at what Lord Henry had said in a chance mood of cynical jesting. At 5 o'clock he rang his bell for his servant and gave him the order to pack his things for the night expense to town, and to have them, and to have the brougham at the door by 8:30. He was determined not to sleep another night at Selby Royal. It was an ill-omened place. Death walked there in the sunlight. The grass of the forest had been spotted with blood. Then he wrote a note to Lord Henry, telling him that he was going up to town to consult his doctor, and asking him to entertain his guests in his absence. As he was putting it into an envelope, a knock came to the door, and his valet informed him that the head keeper wished to see him. He frowned and bit his lip. Send him in, he murmured after some moments' hesitation. As soon as the man entered, Dorian pulled his checkbook out of a drawer and spread it out before him. I suppose you have come about the unfortunate accident of this morning, Thornton, he said, taking up a pen. Yes, sir, answered the gatekeeper. Was the poor fellow married? Had he any people dependent on him? Asked Dorian, looking bored. If so... Oh, excuse me. Beg pardon. Was the poor fellow married? Had he any people dependent on him? Asked Dorian, looking bored. If so, I should not like them to be left in want. I will send them any sum of money you may think is necessary. We don't know who he is, sir. That is why I took the liberty of coming to you about. Don't know who he is, said Dorian listlessly. What do you mean? Was he not one of your men? No, sir. Never saw him before. Seems like a sailor, sir. The pen dropped from Dorian Gray's hand, and he felt as if his heart had suddenly stopped beating. A sailor, he cried out. Did you say a sailor? Yes, sir. He looked as if he had been a sort of sailor, tattooed on both arms, and that kind of thing. Was there anything found on him? Said Dorian, leaning forward and looking at the man with startled eyes. Anything that would tell his name? Some money, sir. Not much. And a 6-shooter. There was no name of any kind. A decent-looking man, sir, but rough-like. A sort of sailor, we think. Dorian started to his feet. A terrible hope flooded past him. He clutched at it madly. Where's the body? He exclaimed. Quick, I must see it at once. It is in an empty stable on the house farm, sir. The folk don't like to have that sort of thing in their house. They say a corpse brings bad luck. The home farm. Go there at once and meet me. Tell one of the grooms to bring my horse around. No, never mind. I'll go to the stables myself. It will save time. In less than a quarter of an hour. Oh. Thank you, Wasabi. And I'm amazed you can read like that without water. I have a cup of tea with me, so I take sips in between pauses whenever I can. Whenever my throat gets really dry. So it's just, I do have a cup of tea. I do take sips of drink, every chance I can whenever my throat starts to get dry. I just take really quick sips. Just enough to, just to rehydrate my, my vocal cords. In less than a quarter of an hour, Dorian Gray was galloping down the long avenue as hard as he could go. The trees seemed to sweep past him in spectral procession, and the wild shadows to fling themselves across his path. Once the mare swerved at a white gatepost and nearly threw him. He lashed her across the neck with his crop. She cleft the dusty air like an arrow. The stones flew from her hooves. At last he reached the home farm. 2 men were loitering in the yard. He leaped from the saddle and threw the reins to one of them. The farthest stable, a light was glimmering. Something seemed to tell him that the body was there, and he hurried to the door and pulled his hand upon the latch. There he paused for a moment, feeling that he was on the brink of a discovery that would either make or mar his life. Then he thrust open the door and entered. On a heap of sacking in the far corner was lying the dead body of a man dressed in a coarse shirt and a pair of blue trousers. A spotted handkerchief had been placed over the face. A coarse candle stuck in a bottle sputtered beside it. Dorian Gray shuddered. He felt that he could not be the hand to take the handkerchief away, and called out to one of the farm servants to come to him. Take that thing off the face. I wish to see it, he said, clutching at the doorpost for support. When the farm servant had done so, he stepped forward. A cry of joy broke from his lips. The man who had been shot in the thicket was James Vine. He stood there for some time looking at the dead body. As he rode home, his eyes were full of tears, for he knew he was safe. Chapter 19. There is no use of your telling me that you are going to be good, cried Lord Henry, dipping his white fingers into a red copper bowl filled with rosewater. You are quite perfect. Pray, don't change. Dorian Gray shook his head. No, Harry, I have done too many dreadful things in my life. I am not going to do any more. I began my good actions yesterday. Where were you yesterday? In the country, Harry. I was staying at a little inn by myself. My dear boy, said Lord Henry, smiling, anybody can be good in the country. There are no temptations there. That is the reason why people who live out of town are so absolutely uncivilized. Civilization is not by any means an easy thing to attain to. There are only 2 ways by which a man can reach it. One is by being cultured. the other by being corrupt. Country people have no opportunity of being either, so they stagnate. Culture and corruption, echoed Dorian. I have known something of both. It seems terrible to me now that they should ever be found together. For I have a new ideal, Harry. I'm going to alter. I think I have been altered. You have not yet told me what your good action was, or did you say you had done more than one? Asked his companion, as he spilled into his plate a little crimson pyramid of seeded strawberries, and, through a perforated shell-shaped spoon, snowed white sugar upon them. I can tell you, Harry, it is not a story I could tell to anyone else. I spared somebody. It sounds vain, but you understand what I mean. She is quite beautiful, and wonderfully like Sybil Vane. I think it was that which first attracted me to her. You remember Sybil, don't you? How long ago that seems. Well, Hetty was not one of our own class, of course. She was simply a girl in the village, but I really loved her. I am quite sure that I loved her. All during this wonderful May we have been having, I used to run down and see her 2 or 3 times a week. Yesterday she met me in a little orchard. The apple blossoms kept tumbling down on her hair, and she was laughing. We were to have gone away together this morning at dawn. Suddenly I determined to leave her as a flower like as I had found her. I should think the novelty of the emotion must have given you a thrill of real pleasure, Dorian, interrupted Lord Henry, but I can finish your ideal for you. You gave her good advice and broke her heart. That was the beginning of your reformation. Harry, you are horrible. You mustn't say such these dreadful things. Hetty's heart is not broken. Of course she cried and all that, but there is no disgrace upon her. She can live, like Perdita, in the garden of mint and marigold. And weep over a faithless Florizel, said Lord Henry, laughing as he leaned back in his chair. My dear Dorian, you have the most curiously boyish moods. Do you think this girl will ever be really content now with anyone of her own rank? I suppose she will be married some day to a rough carter or a grinning plowman. Well, the fact of having met you and loved you will teach her to despise her husband, and she will be wretched. From a moral point of view, I cannot say that I think much better of your great renunciation. Even as a beginning, it is poor. Besides, how do you know that Hetty isn't floating in the present moment in some star-lit mill pond with lovely water lilies around her like Ophelia? I can't bear this, Harry. You mock at everything, and then suggest the most serious tragedies. I am sorry I told you now. I don't care what you say to me. I know I was right in acting as I did. Poor Hetty. As I rode past the farm this morning, I saw her white face at the window, like a spray of jasmine. Don't let us talk about it any more, and don't try to persuade me that the first good action I have done for years, the first little bit of self-sacrifice I have ever known, is really a sort of sin. I want to be better. I am going to be better. But tell me something about yourself. What is going on in town? I have not been to the club for days. That people are still discussing poor Basil's disappearance. I should have thought they had got tired of that by this time, said Dorian, pouring himself out some wine and frowning slightly. My dear boy, they have only been talking about it for 6 weeks, and the British police are not really equal to the mental strain of having more than one topic every 3 months. They have been very fortunate lately, however. They have had my own divorce case and Alan Campbell's suicide. And now they have gone to the mysterious disappearance of an artist. Scotland Yard still insists that the man in the grey ulster who had left for Paris by midnight train on the 9th of November was poor Basil, and the French police declare that Basil never arrived in Paris at all. I suppose in about a fortnight we shall be told that he had been seen in San Francisco. It is an odd thing, but everyone who disappears is said to be seen at San Francisco. It must be a delightful city and possess all the attractions of the next world. What do you think happened to Basil? Asked Dorian, holding up his burgundy against the light and wondering how it was that he could discuss this matter so calmly. I have not the slightest idea. If Basil chooses to hide himself, it is no business of mine. If he is dead, I don't want to think about him. That's the only thing that ever terrifies me. I hate it. Why? Asked the younger man wearily. Because, said Lord Henry, passing beneath his nostrils the gilt trellis of an open vinaigrette box. One can survive everything nowadays except that. Death and vulgarity are the two facts in the 19th century that one cannot explain away. Let us have our coffee in the music room, Dorian. You must play Chopin to me. The man with whom my wife ran away played Chopin exquisitely. Poor Victoria. I was very fond of her. The house is rather lonely without her. Of course, married life is merely a habit. A bad habit. But then one regrets the loss, even of one's worst habits. Perhaps one regrets them the most. They are such an essential part of one's personality. Dorian said nothing but rose from the table, and passing into the next room, sat down to the piano and let his fingers stray across the white and black ivory of the keys. After the coffee had been brought in, he stopped and looked over at Lord Henry, and said, "Harry, did it ever occur to you that Basil was murdered?" Lord Henry yawned. Basil was very popular, and always wore a Waterbury watch. Why should he have been murdered? He was not clever enough to have enemies. Of course, he had a wonderful genius for painting. But a man can paint like Velasquez and yet be as dull as possible. Basil was really rather dull. He only interested me once, and that was when he told me years ago that he had a wild adoration for you, and that you were the dominant motive of his art. I was very fond of Basil, said Dorian with a note of sadness in his voice. Don't people say that he was murdered? Oh, some of the papers do. It does not seem to me to be at all probable. I know there are dreadful places in Paris, but Basil was not the sort of man to have gone to them. He had no curiosity. It was his chief defect. But would you say, Harry, if I told you that I had murdered Basil? Said the younger man. He watched him intently after he had spoken. I was saying, my dear fellow, that you were posing for a character that doesn't suit you. All crime is vulgar, and just as all vulgarity is a crime. It is not in you, Dorian, to commit a murder. I am sorry if I hurt your vanity by saying so, but I assure you it is true. Crime belongs exclusively to the lower orders. I don't blame them in the smallest degree. I should fancy that crime was to them what art is to us, simply a method of procuring extraordinary sensations. A method of procuring sensations? Do you think, then, that a man who has once committed a murder could possibly do the same crime again? Don't tell me that. Oh, anything becomes a pleasure if one does it too often, cried Lord Henry, laughing. That is one of the most important secrets of life. Should I fancy, however, that murder is always a mistake? One should never do anything that one cannot talk about after dinner. But let us pass from poor Basil. I wish I could believe that he had come to such a really romantic end as you suggest, but I can't. I dare say he fell into the sin off an omnibus, and that the conductor hushed up the scandal. Yes, I should fancy that it was his end. I see him lying now on his back under those dull green waters, with the heavy barges floating over him and the long weeds catching his hair. Do you know, I don't think he would have done much more good work. During the last 10 years of his painting, he had gone off very much. Dorian heaved a sigh, and Lord Henry strolled across the room and began to stroke the head of a curious Java parrot, a large grey-plumaged bird with a pink crest and tail, that was balancing itself upon a bamboo perch. As his pointed fingers touched it, it dropped its white scarf of crinkled lids over black glass-like eyes and began to sway backwards and forwards. Yes, he continued, turning round and taking his handkerchief out of his pocket. His painting has gone quite off. It seemed to me that he had lost something. It had lost an ideal. When you and he ceased to be great friends, he ceased to be a great artist. What was it separated you? I suppose he bored you. If so, he never forgave you. It's a habit bores have. By the way, what has become of that wonderful portrait he did of you? I don't think I have ever seen it since he finished it. Oh, I remember you telling me years ago that you had sent it down to Selby, that it had gotten mislaid or stolen on the way. You never got it back. What a pity. It really was a masterpiece. I remember I wanted to buy it. I wish I had now. It belonged to Basil's best period. Since then, his work, with that curious mixture of bad painting and good intentions that always entitles a man to be called a representative British artist. Did you advise for it? You should. I forget, said Dorian. I suppose I did, but I never really liked it. I am sorry I sat for it. The memory of the thing is hateful to me. Why do you talk of it? It used to remind me of those curious lines of some play. Hamlet, I think. How did they run? Like the painting of a sorrow, a face without a heart. Yes, that's what it was like. Lord Henry laughed. If a man treats light artistically, his brain is his heart, he answered, sinking into an armchair. Excuse me, I just need to adjust my butt just a little bit because I am slipping from my seat. The way I'm sitting. Ugh, there we go. There we go, nice and comfy. Dorian Gray shook his head and struck some soft chord on the piano. Like the painting of a sorrow, he repeated, a face without a heart. The other man laid back and looked at him with half-closed eyes. By the way, Dorian, he said after a pause, what does it profit of a man if he gains the whole world and lose? How does the quotation run? His own soul? The music jarred, and Dorian Gray started and stared at his friend. Why do you ask me that, Harry? My dear fellow, said Lord Henry, elevating his eyebrows in surprise. I asked you because I thought you might be able to give me an answer. That is all. I was going to the park last Sunday, and close by the Marble Arch there stood a little crowd of shabby-looking people listening to some vulgar street preacher. As I passed by, I heard a man yelling out that question to his very audience. It struck me as being rather dramatic. London is very rich in curious effects of that kind. A wet Sunday, an uncouth Christian in a mackintosh, a ring of sickly white faces under a broken roof of dripping umbrellas, and a wonderful phrase flung out into the air by shrill, hysterical lips. It was really very good in its way, quite a suggestion. I thought of telling the prophet that art had a soul, but the man had not. I am afraid, however, he would not have understood me. Don't, Harry. The soul is a terrible reality. It can be bought and sold and bartered away. It can be poisoned or made perfect. There is a soul in each one of us. I know it. Do you feel quite sure of that, Dorian? Quite sure. Ah, then it must be an illusion. The things one feels absolutely certain about are never true. That is the fatality of faith and the lessons of romance. How grave you are! Don't be so serious. What have you and I to do with the superstitions of our age? No, we have given up our belief of the soul. Play me something. Play me a nocturne, Dorian, and as you play, tell me, in a low voice, how have you kept your youth? You must have some secret. I am only 10 years older than you are, and I am wrinkled, and worn and yellow. You are really wonderful, Dorian. You have never looked more charming than you do tonight. You remind me of the day I saw you first. You are rather cheeky, very shy, and absolutely extraordinary. You have changed, of course, but not in appearance. I wish you would tell me your secret. To get back to my youth, I would do anything in the world except to take exercise, get up early, or be respectable. Youth. There is nothing like it. It's absurd to talk about the ignorance of youth. The only people whose opinions I listen now with any respect are people much younger than myself. They seem in front of me. Life has revealed to them her latest wonders. As for the aged, I always contradict the aged. I do it on principle. If you ask them their opinion on something that happened yesterday, they will suddenly give you their opinions current to in 1820. The people wore high stocks, believed in everything, and knew absolutely nothing. How lovely that thing you are playing is. I wonder, does Chopin write it at Majorca, with the sea weeping around the villa of the salt spray dashing against the panes? It is marvelously romantic. What a blessing it is that there is one art left to us that is not imitative. Don't stop. I want music tonight. It seems to me that you are the young Apollo and I am the Marsyas listening to you. I have sorrows, Dorian, of my own, that even you know nothing of. The tragedy of old age is not that one is old, but that one is young. I am amazed sometimes at my own sincerity. Ah, Dorian, how happy you are. What an exquisite life you have had. You have drunk deeply of everything. You have crushed the grapes against your palate. You have crushed the grapes against your palate. Nothing has been hidden from you. It is not. It has all been to you no more than a sound of music. It has not marred you. You are still the same. I am not the same, Harry. Yes, you are. You are the same. I wonder what the rest of your life will be. Don't spoil it by renunciations. At present, you are a perfect type. Don't make yourself incomplete. You are quite flawless now. You need not shake your head. I know you are. Besides, Dorian, don't deceive yourself. Life is not governed by will or intention. Life is a question of nerves and fibers and slow build-up cells in which thought hides itself and passion has its dreams. You may fancy yourself safe and think yourself strong, but a chance tone of color in a room or a morning sky, a particular perfume that you once had loved that brings back subtle memories with it, a line from a forgotten poem that you had come across again, a cadence from a piece of music that you had ceased to play. I tell you, Dorian, that it is on things like these that our lives depend. Browning writes about that somewhere, but our own senses will imagine them for us. There are moments when the ardor of Lilas Blanc passes suddenly across me, and I have to live the strangest month of my life over again. I wish I could change places with you, Dorian. The world has cried out against us both, but has always worshipped you. It will always worship you. You are the type of what the age is searching for, and what it is afraid it has found. I'm so glad that you had never done anything, never carved a statue, or painted a picture, or produced anything outside of yourself. Life has been your art. You have set yourself to music. Your days are your sonnets. Dorian rose up from the piano and passed his hands through his hair. Yes, life has been exquisite, he murmured, but I am not going to have the same life, Harry. And you must not say these extravagant things to me. You don't know everything about me. I think that if you did, even you would turn from me. You laugh. Don't laugh. Why have you stopped playing, Dorian? Go back and give me the nocturne over again. Look at that great honey-colored moon that hangs in the dusky air. She is waiting for you to charm her, and if you play, she will come closer to the earth. Won't you? Let us go to the club, then. You won't? Then let us go to the club, then. It has been a charming evening, and we must end it charmingly. There is someone at White's who wants immensely to know you. Young Lord Poole, Bournemouth's eldest son. He has already copied your neckties, and has begged me to introduce you to him. He is quite delightful, and rather reminds me of you. I hope not, said Dorian with a sad look in his eyes. But I am tired tonight, Harry. I shan't go to the club. It is nearly 11, and I want to go to bed early. Do stay. You have never played so well as tonight. There was something in your touch that was wonderful. It had more expression than I had ever heard from it before. It is because I'm going to be good, he answered, smiling. I'm a little changed already. You cannot change to me, Dorian, said Lord Henry. You and I will always be friends. Yet you poisoned me with a book once. I should not forgive that. Harry, promise me that you will never lend that book to anyone. It does harm. My dear boy, you are really beginning to moralize. You will soon be going about like the converted and the revivalists, warning people against all the sins of which you have grown tired. You are much too delightful to do that. Besides, it is no use. You and I are what we are, and will be what we always will be. As for being poisoned by a book, there is no such thing as that. Art has no influence upon action. It annihilates the desire to act. It is superbly sterile. The book that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame. That is all. We won't discuss literature. Come round tomorrow. I'm going to ride at 11. We might go together, and I will take you to lunch afterward with Lady Ransom. She is a charming woman, and wants to consult you about some tapestry she's thinking of buying. Mind you come, or shall we lunch with our little Duchess? She says she never sees you now. Or perhaps you are tired of Gladys. I thought you would be. Her clever tongue gets on one's nerves. Well, in any case, be here at 11. Must I really come, Harry? Certainly, the park is quite lovely now. I don't think there have been such lilacs since the year I met you. Very well, I shall be here at 11, said Dorian. Good night, Harry. As he reached the door, he hesitated for a moment, as if he had something more to say, then sighed and went out. Chapter 20. It was a lovely night, so warm that he threw his coat over his arm and did not even pull his silk scarf around his throat. As he strolled home, smoking his cigarette, two young men in evening dress passed him. He heard one of them whisper to the other, "That is Dorian Gray." He remembered how pleased he used to be when he was pointed out, or stared at, or talked about. He was tired of hearing his own name now. Half the charm of the little village where he had been so often lately, that no one knew who he was. He often told the girl whom he had lured to love him that he was poor, and she had believed him. He had told her once that he was wicked, and she had laughed at him, and answered that wicked people were always very old and very ugly. What a laugh she had, just like a thrush singing. How pretty she had been in her cotton dresses and her large hats. She knew nothing, but she had everything that he had lost. When he reached home, he found his servants waiting for him. He sent him to bed and threw himself down on the sofa in the library. He began to think over some of the things that Lord Henry had said to him. Was it really true that one could never change? He felt a wild longing for the unstained purity of his boyhood, his rose-white boyhood, as Lord Henry had once called it. He knew that he had tarnished himself, filled his mind with corruption, and given horror to his fancy, that he had been an evil influence to others, and had experienced a terrible joy in being so, that of the lives that had crossed his own, it had been the fairest and the most full of promise that he had brought to shame. But it was all irretrievable. But was it all irretrievable? Hi, Track Race! It's okay if you can't stay. We're almost done with the story anyway. We're on the last chapter. But thank you for stopping by, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Let's see. But was it all irretrievable? Was there no hope for him? In what a monstrous moment of pride and passion he had prayed that the portrait should bear the burden of his days, and he kept the unsullied splendor of eternal youth. All his failures had been due to that. Better for him that each sin of his life had brought its sure swift penalty along with it. There was a purification in punishment. Not forgive us our sins, but smite us for our iniquities, should be the prayer of man to a most just God. The curiously carved mirror that Lord Henry had given to him so many years ago was standing on the table, and the white-limbed cupids laughed round as if in as of old. He took it up, as he had done that night of horror when he first noted the change of the fatal picture, and with wild, tear-dimmed eyes he looked into his polished shield. Once someone who had terribly loved him had written to him a mad letter ending with these illustrious words: "The world is changed because you are made of ivory and gold. The curves of your lips rewrite history." The phrase came back to his memory, and he repeated them over and over to himself. Then he loathed his own beauty, and flinging the mirror on the floor, crushed it into silver splinters beneath his heel. It was his beauty that had ruined him, his beauty and the youth that he had prayed for. For those two things, his life had been free from stain. His beauty had been to him but a mask, his youth but a mockery. What was youth at best? A green and unripe time, a time of shallow moods and sickly thoughts. Why had he worn its livery? Youth had spoiled him. It was better not to think of the past. Nothing could alter that. It was of himself and of his own future that he had to think. James Vane was hidden in a nameless grave. He was hidden in a nameless grave in Selby churchyard. Alan Campbell had shot himself one night in his laboratory, but had not revealed the secret that he had been forced to know. The excitement, such as it was, over Basil Howard's disappearance would soon pass away. It was already waning. He was perfectly safe there. Nor, indeed, was it the death of Basil Howard that weighed the most upon his mind. It was the living death of his own soul that troubled him. Basil had painted the portrait that had marred his life. He could not forgive him that. It was the portrait that had done everything. Basil said things to him that were unbearable, and that he had yet borne with patience. The murder had been simply the madness of a moment. As for Alan Campbell, his suicide had been his own act. He had chosen to do it. It was nothing to him. A new life. That was what he wanted. That was what he was waiting for. Surely it had begun already. He had spared some innocent thing, at any rate. He would never again tempt innocence. He would be good. As he thought of Hetty Merton, he began to wonder if the portrait in the locked room had changed. Surely it was not still so horrible as it had been. Perhaps if his life became pure, it would be able to expel every sign of evil passion from his face. Perhaps the signs of evil had already gone away. He would go and look. He took the lamp from the table and crept upstairs. As he unbarred the door, a smile of joy flitted across his strangely young-looking face, and lingered for a moment about his lips. Yes, he would be good, and the hideous thing that he had hidden away would no longer be a terror to him. As he felt as if the load had been lifted from him already. He went in quietly, locking the door behind him, as was his custom, and dragged the purple hanging from the portrait. A cry of pain and indignation broke from him. He could see no change, save that in the eyes there was a look of cunning, and in the mouth the curved wrinkle of the hypocrite. The thing was still loathsome, more loathsome if possible than before. Like the scarlet dew that had spotted the hand seemed brighter and more like blood newly spilt. That he trembled. Had it been merely vanity that made him do this one good deed, or the desire for new sensations Lord Henry had hinted with his mocking laugh, or that passion to act a part that sometimes makes us do things finer than we are ourselves, or perhaps all these. And why was the red stain larger than it had been? It seemed to have crept like a horrible disease over the wrinkled fingers. There was blood on the painted feet as though the thing had dripped, blood even on the hand that had not held the knife. Confess? Did it mean that he was to confess? To give himself up and be put to death? He laughed. He felt that the idea was monstrous. Besides, even if he did confess, who would believe him? There was no trace of the murdered man anywhere. Everything belonging to him had been destroyed. He himself had burned what had been below stairs. The world would simply say that he was mad. They would shut him up until he persisted in his story. And it was his duty to confess, to suffer public shame, and to make public atonement. There was a God who called upon men to tell their sins to earth as well as to heaven. Nothing that he could do would cleanse him until he had told his own sin. His sin? He shrugged his shoulders. The death of Basil Howard seemed very little to him. He was thinking of Hetty Merton. For it was an unjust mirror, this mirror of his soul that he was looking at. Vanity, curiosity, hypocrisy? Had there been nothing more in his renunciation than that? There had been something more. At least he thought so. But who could tell? No, there had been nothing more. The vanity he spared her. The hypocrisy had worn the mask of goodness. For curiosity's sake he had tried the denial of self. He recognized that now. This murder. Was it to dog him all his life? Was he always to be burdened by his past? Was he really to confess? Never. There was only one bit of evidence left against him, the picture itself. That was the evidence. He could destroy it. Why had he kept it so long? Once it had given him pleasure to watch it changing and growing old. Of late he had felt no such pleasure. He had kept him awake at night. When he had been away, he had been filled with terror lest other eyes should look upon it. It had brought melancholy across his passions. Its mere memory had marred many moments of joy. It had been like conscious to him. Yes, it had been conscious. He would destroy it. He looked around and saw the knife that had stabbed Basil Howard. He had cleaned it many times, till there was no stain left upon it. It was bright and glistened. As it had killed the painter, so it would kill the painter's work and all that it meant. It would kill the past, and when that was dead, he would be free. It would kill this monstrous soul life, and without its hideous warning, he would be at peace. He seized the thing and stabbed the picture with it. There was a cry heard and a crash. The cry was so horrible in its agony that the frightened servants woke and crept out of their rooms. Two gentlemen who were passing in the square below stopped and looked at the great house. They walked on until they met the policeman and brought him back. The man rang the bell several times, but there was no answer. Except for a light in one of the top windows, the house was all dark. After a time, he went away and stood in an adjoining portico and watched. "Whose house is that, constable?" asked the elder of the two gentlemen. "Mr. Dorian Gray's, sir," answered the policeman. They looked on each other and they walked away and sneered. One of them was Sir Henry Ashton's uncle. Inside, in the servants' part of the house, the half-clad domestics were talking in low whispers to each other. Old Mrs. Leaf was crying and wringing her hands. Francis was as pale as death. After about a quarter of an hour, he got the coachman and one of the footmen crept upstairs. They knocked, but there was no reply. They called out. Everything was still. Finally, after vainly trying to force open the door, they got on the roof and dropped down into the balcony. The windows yielded easily. The bolts were old. When they entered, they found hanging upon the wall a splendid portrait of their master as they had last seen him, in all the wonder of his exquisite youth and beauty. Lying on the floor was a dead man in evening dress with a knife in his heart. He was withered, wrinkled, and loathsome of visage. It was not till they had examined the rings that they recognized who it was. And that's the end of the story! We have reached the end, our final conclusion. And yeah, it went from 0 to 100 pretty quickly. That was great! Oh man, I haven't read a classic like this in so long. It was so good. So good. Next week we'll start a new story. I haven't picked out a book yet, but I will pretty soon. But you guys, that's the end of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys really liked it. And I really did enjoy it. It was nutty. It was nutty. It was definitely one hell of a story. And yeah, so I'm gonna call it here today. We finished right under 2 hours, right on time, which I kind of guessed that we would. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for being super awesome and enjoying the story. Next week we're gonna start something new. I don't know what I'm gonna pick yet, but I will announce it when I do. And yeah, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, night, evening, afternoon, whatever. And yeah, remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world because the world needs more goodness. I love you all so very, 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 very much, and I will see you guys on Thursday. Thursday we'll be playing Frambo, so it'll be a lot of fun. Alright, you guys take care, have a happy Wednesday, enjoy your time, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!